Got an Alesis Multimix 8 here. I've owned it for roughly 10-15 years, and all of a sudden it started making a horrible buzzing sound. First I thought it might have been the power supply. Wasn't. Turns out a common issue with these is the capacitors going out, and I'll point out the usual culprits are these two here. Now normally they're laying flat, they're glued to the board with this brown glue that's reminiscent of what some Japanese manufacturers used to use, and it would tend to go conductive. I tested it, it's fine, so it hasn't gone conductive. But if you notice, I don't know if it's visible on the camera, this one's gone bulging, and I noticed when I pulled it up it had some residue that was acidic. So this one's blown, which is most likely, and from what I understand reading around, is normally the culprit. It's a common failure in these. So all you really need to do to get this panel is held on to the base of the mixing console. Here's the console right here. I'll flip it over, and that's the underside. It's held on with 10 screws that are easy, and you just disconnect two ribbon cables. One is wider than the other, so they will only go into their correct prospective connectors. So that should be fairly easy to deal with. To remove this board to service these properly, there's 4 screws. There's one in each corner. Here, here, one tucked way back here. They're Phillips. There is a thermally conductive pad over there. When you remove this bar, it allows you to pull those up off there. When you do that, clean off the thermal compound, because by now it's actually gone quite hard. So what I'll do is I'll clean that off, clean the power transistors off, and apply some new heatsink compound, as well as replacing these capacitors. So I'll get my soldering iron, heat it up, and remove this, and we'll replace them and see how well it works when I come back. Right, here I am in the middle. Got the heatsink. This is just a piece of aluminum cleaned up. Before I clean these up, I'm putting the new replacement capacitors in. I got a little clamp here to hold the board up, because it saves me from having to disconnect all those. Here's the bad capacitor. You can see it's a bit bulged, and when I went to pull it off the board, one of the leads came out and it was a bit burnt, so on the inside. So yeah, this one definitely went bad. Unfortunately I wasn't able to test it. This one is just within specifications, but I'm replacing it anyway because I purchased 2 new ones. These are a bit higher temperature rating. These are rated at 105C, whereas the original ones, I don't know if I can get that to focus. Please focus. Will it focus? Will it focus? No, not going to focus. These are made, these are Lelon. Somewhat known for being not the best. I think they're like tier 5 capacitors when it comes to power supply manufacturers. Tier 4, tier 5, I can't remember. These are rated 1000 UF, 35 volts at 85C. The new ones, which these are NHGs, which are made by Panasonic, are rated pretty much same component, 1000 UF, 35 volt, and rated at 105C. Get that better in there. And I just, when I go in, I use my soldering iron, and I give it a little bit of solder, and then I wick it off using solder wick, and that way, this is a double-sided board, it'll pull, the wick will pull the solder out and allows me to just pull the component off. Sometimes I might need to use my little puffer thing. I set it down and oh, there it is. Little hand soldering device. I don't have one of those high-end vacuum desolderers. That'd be nice. Be nice to have one of those, but I don't have the space for it, to be honest. Nor do I do much electronic repair anymore. I just dabble. But I'm going to get the new one soldered in, get these all cleaned off, and if you want a hint to clean off old, nasty, hard, crumbling heatsink compound, Roncinol or a naphthalated spirit will clean those off nice and neat, and it won't damage the part, won't leave any residue, dries nice and clean. You can go over it with a bit of rubbing alcohol if you want to clean those off. That also works, but naphthalated spirits, Roncinol, lighter fluid, works really good for that. What I'm going to do, you might wonder what I'm using for heatsink compound. I am using ceramic 2 thermal compound. I buy these in the big syringes because I do computer stuff, and it's just handy to have that on there. We'll get that other one whacked in and put back together, and we'll see if it works. Right, just a quick snip here. I've got the new capacitors in, got them folded back over where into the position that the old ones were in, laying down much like that one. I'm not going to glue these down. I didn't remove any of the glue that was holding the old ones down that's on the board itself. It's not gone conductive. I'm not going to mess with it. It's usually some sort of epoxy, and I can't scrape it off because it'll most likely, it's gone really hard and it'll most likely damage the board. What you can do is you can use just regular glue gun glue to hold these in place. This mixing console has been sitting in the same spot for years and years and years, so it's not going to be knocking about in a moving type environment, so these don't need to be glued down. Now, if I was going to be carrying it around for any reason, then yeah, I'd glue them down with some hot glue, just some hot glue. I'm not going to, someone might ask, why didn't you replace the rest of the capacitors on the boards? I'm not going to do that. The most common failure on these Alesis Multimix 8 USBs and on the Multimix 8 Firewire tends to be these power smoothing capacitors. They take the ripple out of the 18 volts before it's converted over to the voltage that the rest of the mixing console needs. And this is the most common failure point on these, is these two capacitors. They just get really hot because of their relative closeness to these transistors here. These just get really hot. These don't seem to have a problem. These are on the low voltage side after they've been rectified by these diodes. So these are fairly low voltage, and they just keep on knocking about, but these other capacitors are known to just completely die. With that, I'll put it back together and we'll see if it works. Just a quick hint, as you're pulling this apart and putting it back together, this is how you would lay this out. It would, when you remove the screws, it would fold like this, like a book, and these connectors would go in these slots respectively, and that's how. And then putting it back together is just the reverse. You connect your wires up, your ribbon cables, and then fold it back in, zip the screws in, and then you're good. Battery's flashing, so I'll be right back with a test. Right, we got it back together. Notice there's no hum. I've got the headphones connected into it. No hum, otherwise this would be pegged out. The phantom voltage light comes on, comes off. There's no popping or anything, so that fixed it from what I can tell. We're going to fire up some music off of the YouTube free music source. How about we try this? Awesome. I think it works. That did the treat. So yeah, that's a common issue with these older Alesis Multimix mixing consoles or mixing decks, that the power smoothing capacitors in them tend to go out, and it'll just do nothing but buzz. And it's a relatively easy fix if you've done any sort of soldering on anything. It's really easy. One thing I would suggest is, if you have a solder sucker, wet the solder with fresh solder, then wick what you can off, and then use the solder sucker to remove the rest, and the cap should come right off. If you open it up and you notice anything else looks suspect, replace it. I know you can't get replacement boards for these anymore, but these are so simple to work on that just about anyone can do it. With that, hope you find this useful, and if I find anything else worth posting on here on this YouTube channel, I'll go ahead and do it. If you have any questions, feel free to put a comment in there. I do moderate comments, or will be moderating comments, so they won't show up right away, as I'll go through them and make sure they're appropriate for anyone who happens to come across this video. Sorry, but that's the way I do things. Hope you have a good day, and I'm going to listen to some music. I'm going to put this back into service. But take care. I wanted to make a quick note as to the screws that go into the bottom, into these. The screws that mate, that go into the metal pieces, are fine thread. The screws on here, 4 screws that go into here. I've got one in my hand. I don't know how well that's going to show up. The screws that go into the plastic casing sides are coarse thread. You want to make sure that you don't mix those up, because it'll really, these will actually fall out of the plastic, because they're larger diameter, actually, due to the coarseness of the thread. But yeah, I wanted to make that note for anyone who's working on one of these. Make sure you sort your screws. You'll have 6 fine threads. 3 will go on the base here. The other 3 will go along the seam here. And then you've got 4 screws that hold it into the plastic. And sometimes you might come across this. This is one, that's why this one's missing. It broke. Happens sometimes. It might have gotten dropped. I know I've moved a couple times since I purchased this, so it may have gotten dropped. Easy fix. A little epoxy will fix that. With that, take care.